So, after an introduction like that, it's hard to get your attention on something else. But if you bear with me, we'll get to the toilets because they are important. So, when I first came to Japan, my understanding of the country was very little, and it still is very little. Growing up, I'm a self-confessed nerd. So my understanding of this country in the beginning was through the lens of the comic books I collected. It was through the anime that I saw, films like Akira. It was through the old samurai films. And when I first came, I was so excited that the first destination for me was the sumo stadium. But of course, it was not the right season, and no one was in town. But that was the beginning of my experience here in Japan, and it is the beginning of what I hope will be a very long experience. One of the things that I'm still learning about, still discovering, is Japanese filmmaking. In particular, the films of Akira Kurosawa, one of the greatest post-war filmmakers of our time. But there's a film that Kurosawa made that is very personal to me, and it is a film of Aikido, which you may know as the story of a middle-aged bureaucrat who journeys through his life until the moment that he finds out that he has cancer. And he goes into this sort of inward introspection to look for meaning. And he finds that he hasn't actually helped many people along his way. So he goes in pursuit of meaning. And how does he find that? He has a dream, a vision, to turn a sewer into a children's playground. So obviously, there's a connection between the dream of the main character, Kanji, and myself. Not directly, but of course, we both have a fondness for sewers. On my second visit to Japan, I had the privilege of going to the INAX Toilet Museum, or it's the Tile Museum, but in the Tile Museum is a toilet exhibition. Here's one of the sewer pipes that I got to crawl through. So I'm a social entrepreneur, and the organization that I work on is Toilet Hackers. And I know that might be a funny phrase, toilet hacking. So what is that? Well, most people in developed countries don't actually think about the fact that 40% of the world doesn't have access to basic sanitation. They don't have access to the most simple toilet, never mind the incredible innovative ones here. And you might think that's just an inconvenience, but it's not. In the last 10 years, more children have died than combined deaths from conflict, armed conflict, since World War II. Just think about that. That's 1.5 million kids a year, or on a daily basis, about 10 times the amount of people in this room. But they're kids. So that's a big problem. It's an ugly problem. So we try and get people to think about this, and we work on solutions for problems like this. And Akira's, the sort of the dream of Kanji in the film is not so unlike my hope and my dream that one day we'll be able to take open sewers and convert them into toilets for everyone. But we're a little long way from there, and that's a big challenge. So how do we solve that? How do we take that on? Well, there are lots of resources out there, but I don't think we're using our resources in the best way we can. If you think about the traditions of philanthropy around the world, I've gone to my fair share of fancy galas and fundraisers and charitable events. I've even hosted quite a few myself. But these kind of traditional systems of philanthropy are not so effective. And I think we can do something better. I think we can allocate resources in a different way. Don't you? If so, how do we do that? There's a trend happening now, and it's happening around the world. It's really exciting. There are corporations, there are philanthropists, and there are social entrepreneurs taking on these problems, wicked problems, and they're doing it through the lens of business. And that's interesting to me. I have a word for the mindset that they're using to go about these problems. And it's a word I sort of came up with by combining the root of philanthropy, philanthropia. Where does that come from? It's the Old Greek for the love of humanity. If we think back to our Kurosawa film, that word translates to live, to live. In the truest sense of the word, philanthropy is about living for each other. So how do we do that? If we combine it with what I think is the culture of punk rock, then we have something really interesting. That must be the most obvious thing, right? Punk rock and humanity. Probably not. But let's see, what are these qualities, right? What is it about punk rock that can be applied to working on behalf of humanity? Well, for one, we have to embrace things. We have to embrace them wholeheartedly, like failure. If we're honest about failure, right? Social entrepreneurs are really good about this because they know that these challenges, these problems are really big, and there's bound to be failure. And what is good about failure? Well, it challenges preconceptions. And through failure, we can actually innovate. If we don't take these risks, innovation becomes very difficult. So what are the qualities of a philanthropunk, whether it's a corporation or a citizen or a social entrepreneur? The first one is fearlessness. Fearlessness, but not just any kind of fearlessness. It's fearlessness with resolve, because you're going to have to try and try and try again. A lot of social entrepreneurs fail because they give up after their first failure. But punk rockers, they know that it's messy out there. So fearlessness is not just about confronting fires and taking on these impossible tasks, but it's about knowing how difficult something is going to be and taking it on anyway. If you've ever seen a mosh pit, or you know what it's like to be at the very front of the stage at a concert, when people are really getting into it, and they're dancing and they're jumping around and hitting each other, it's dangerous. You can get kicked in the head, or worse. But if you survive it, it's a lot of fun. So solving global challenges can be messy. It can be a mosh pit. But it is so worthwhile if you make it. The second quality is do it yourself. Nobody is going to go out and solve world hunger for you. They're not. The government will not do that. No one is going to get a toilet in the hands of every single human on the planet. You have to go out and do it yourself. And they're also not going to teach you how to do it. Because if they knew, they would have already done it. So, do it yourself. Punk rock, right? Going back to that. It's really simple music. 3 chords for almost every single song. Why was punk rock like that? Because they wanted to democratize music and make it accessible to anyone who wanted to express themselves. That was one of the best qualities of punk rock. It didn't generate the most incredible music, but it generated something, and it put music into the hands of people that weren't professionally trained, and they were allowed to create. That's cool. That's do it yourself. So social enterprise, philanthropy in the new form, corporate giving in the new form is about do it yourself. You have to hack through it, whatever that big social challenge is, and you have to test and test and test. 2, or 3, collaboration. I have never seen a punk band made up of one person. There is usually a guitarist, a bassist, a drummer, and some kind of singer. So, but together they're the band, right? So we also need bands. Social entrepreneurs need their band. I need a bassist, and I need my beat, and I need my rhythm. And all of us do. Even if you're a philanthropist, I've never heard of a single philanthropist solving one thing on their own. They have an entire army behind them, or a company. So true social change, Philanthropunk is about partnership. rebels. Philanthropunks are inherently rebels because they reject the status quo. They reject the fact that we have to live in a world where 2.5 billion people don't have a toilet. They reject the idea that over 1 billion people have to live without being able to read. They reject the idea that we have to live without the capacity to help each other. That's being a rebel. But it's being a rebel with a cause, not one without. I love James Dean, but I think, he's out. So this is the truest sense. And punk rockers, they made do with what they had, and they didn't wait for what was expected. So that's what it means to be sort of rebel with a cause, is to actually take something on now instead of waiting for someone else to do it, because it's not going to happen. What does a philanthropunk look like? Well, this is my friend Yael. She's Canadian. And Yael, her mom in 2009 was diagnosed with breast cancer. Together as a family, they decided that this was not something that was going to deter them from living. It was not going to alter the course of their lives in a negative way. Yael, she's not a doctor, she's not a researcher, she didn't go to school to learn how to change the world. But she wanted to support her mother, so she made her mother a t-shirt. The language was obviously very strong, and I think she imagined her mother would throw the t-shirt away. But she wore it, her mom wore it, and would walk in the streets wearing it proudly. And people came up to her mother and gave her a hug, because they identified with the frustration that people find when someone in their family gets something like this. There's anger, and there's fear, there's emotion, it's powerful. And she tapped into that, so she made more t-shirts. And she started researching cancer, and she found out that 90% of cancer can be prevented with early detection. But very little was being done in the prevention area. A lot of it's focused on cure. So how do we get people to prevent? Start talking about it. How do you get people to start talking about something like that? Well, you give them a provocative t-shirt. And so she started an organization called Fuck Cancer. And now she's mobilizing hundreds of thousands of teenagers to have the cancer talk with their parents about preventive care. It's pretty cool. That's a philanthropunk. I know that since 3/11, there's been a lot of civic response to things. It's very cool to see the seeds of social enterprise taking root here in Japan. I know that there's a girl here from change.org. I don't know where she is. But I heard last night that they have clocked in their 100,000th member. Yes, so social enterprise is alive and thriving in Japan, whether you see it or not, and whether we can see the effects of it or not yet. But that's exciting. There is an army of philanthropunks here. And the children of Ikiru's playground are in this room. The people that have the capacity to transform are in every society. Through the practices of do-yourself, through a rebel with a cause mindset, through collaboration, and through this sort of philanthropunk attitude, we can make a huge, huge difference in the world. So I would like to try a very short exercise here before I wrap up. I would like all of you to make a hand like this. Trust me on this one. Trust me on this one. And then if you could raise your first finger and your pinky finger together. And then what I'm going to do is actually take a picture of you. Can we all be philanthropunks? Can we all be fearless? Yes? All right. Cool. Thank you. Thank you.